My name is Victoria Chen, and I'm 29 years old. 3 months ago, my entire family showed up to my wedding wearing black like they were attending a funeral. My mother actually fainted when she realized who was walking me down the aisle. But here's the thing that really made headlines in our business community: the man giving me away wasn't my father. It was the CEO of the largest construction company in the state, the same man who owned the mortgage on my parents' house, controlled my brother's business loans, and as of that morning, had just fired my father. The reason he was walking me down the aisle? I was marrying his son. If you've ever been the family disappointment who turned the tables so completely that karma looked like amateur hour, you're going to love this story. Before we dive in, hit that like button if you believe in the power of proving people wrong, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love connecting with people who understand that sometimes the best revenge is a life well lived. Let me take you back to where this all began, 18 months ago at my cousin Derek's engagement party. Picture this: the Riverside Country Club, 150 of our extended family and friends, everyone dressed to impress. I'd just gotten promoted to senior project manager at Chen Construction, the biggest company in our area, but of course, nobody asked about my career. Victoria's 29 now, my mother announced to a circle of aunts, her voice carrying that particular tone reserved for family disappointments. Still no prospects on the horizon. I was standing right there, champagne glass in hand, pretending to study the appetizer table while they dissected my love life like it was a medical condition. Such a shame, Aunt Linda sighed dramatically. She's got a good job, but men don't like women who are too ambitious. Too picky, my father chimed in from his armchair. Victoria thinks she's too good for the nice boys we've introduced her to. Nice boys. Like Tommy Morrison, who lived in his mother's basement at 35, or Craig Patterson, who asked me to split the check on our first date and then spent 20 minutes explaining why feminism was ruining modern romance. Maybe she should lower her standards, my brother Marcus suggested with that smirk I'd grown to hate. Not everyone can be a Prince Charming. The circle of relatives nodded knowingly. Poor Victoria, so successful in business, so hopeless with men. I heard Jennifer Walsh got engaged last month, my mother continued, really warming up to her theme. She's only 25, but she knows what matters. Family, commitment, making a man feel needed. Jennifer Walsh worked part-time at a boutique and spent her weekends posting Instagram selfies, but sure, she had her priorities straight. Victoria's just too independent, Aunt Linda concluded. Men can smell that desperation to control everything. It's not attractive. I wanted to tell them about David Chen, the brilliant, kind, absolutely gorgeous man I'd been secretly dating for 3 months. The one who appreciated my ambition, who bragged about my achievements to his friends, who made me laugh until my sides hurt. But David and I had agreed to keep things quiet until we were sure where the relationship was heading. His father, the CEO of my company, had strict policies about workplace relationships. She'll end up alone, my mother said with finality. Mark my words, Victoria will be that career woman who dies alone with her cats. I don't even like cats. That night, I called David from my apartment, still stinging from the family intervention disguised as party conversation. They think I'm unmarriageable, I told him, curled up on my couch in my pajamas. Their loss, David said simply. Though I have to say, as someone who's been trying to marry you for the past month, their assessment seems flawed. You've been trying to what now? Victoria Chen, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I love you. I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you. The only question is whether you want that too. My heart stopped. We'd been dancing around the L word for weeks, both of us too scared to be the first to say it. I love you too, I whispered. But David, your father, loves you. He's been singing your praises since the Morrison project. He thinks you're the best hire he's ever made. That's different from wanting me as a daughter-in-law. Trust me on this one. Dad's been hoping something would develop between us since the company Christmas party. He said, and I quote, "That girl has more sense in her little finger than most people have in their entire bodies." 3 days later, David took me to dinner at the fanciest restaurant in the city. When he got down on one knee between the appetizer and main course, half the restaurant stopped eating to watch. The ring was perfect, a classic solitaire that caught the light and threw rainbows across the white tablecloth. "Victoria Chen," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "You are the smartest, funniest, most amazing woman I've ever known. Will you marry me?" "Yes," I said, before he'd even finished the question. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." The restaurant erupted in applause. Someone sent over champagne. The elderly couple at the next table told us they'd been married for 50 years and we reminded them of their young selves. But when I called my family the next morning to share the news, the reaction was different. "Engaged," my mother repeated, like I'd announced I was joining the circus. "To whom?" "David Chen. He's wonderful, Mom. You'll love him." "Chen? Is he Chinese?" "His family is Chinese-American, yes. Third generation." Silence. Long, uncomfortable silence. "Well," my father finally said. "I suppose it's better than nothing." Better than nothing. My engagement was better than nothing. "When do we meet him?" my mother asked, her tone suggesting this was more obligation than excitement. "How about Sunday dinner?" "I could bring him over, we could, Sunday's not good. Marcus is bringing his girlfriend again. We don't want to overwhelm them." Marcus had been dating Stephanie for 6 weeks. I'd been with David for 4 months, engaged for 12 hours, but sure, let's not overwhelm the new girlfriend. "What about next weekend?" "Your father's watching the game. Maybe sometime next month." Next month. They wanted to meet my fiancé sometime next month. That Sunday, I went to dinner at David's family home instead. His parents, Helen and Richard Chen, had insisted on celebrating our engagement properly. Their house was warm and welcoming, filled with family photos and the smell of Helen's famous dumplings. "Victoria," Helen hugged me like I was already her daughter. "I'm so happy. David's been talking about you nonstop for months." "She's exaggerating," David said, his arm around my waist. "It was only every conversation." Richard Chen stood up from his armchair, setting aside the business section of the newspaper. At work, he was the intimidating CEO who commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals. At home, he was just David's dad, wearing reading glasses and a cardigan that had seen better days. "Victoria," he said, shaking my hand formally before pulling me into an unexpected hug. "Welcome to the family. David's made an excellent choice." "Thank you, Mr. Chen. I mean, Richard." "Dad," he corrected gently. "You can call me Dad now." The contrast was stark. My family couldn't find time to meet David for 3 weeks. His family was already calling me daughter. Over dinner, Helen showed me David's baby photos while Richard regaled us with stories of David's childhood business ventures. Apparently, at age 8, David had started a neighborhood lawn mowing service and reinvested his profits into better equipment. "He gets that from his mother," Richard said, winking at Helen. "She's the real brains behind the business." "I handle the books," Helen admitted. "Richard builds things, I make sure we can afford to build them." It was exactly the kind of family dynamic I'd always wanted. Supportive, respectful, interested in each other's lives and achievements. Victoria, Richard said as Helen was clearing the dessert plates. I hope you know how proud we are of the work you've been doing. The Morrison project exceeded everyone's expectations. Thank you. It was a great team effort. Leadership makes all the difference. You've got a bright future at the company. I thought about my own father, who still introduced me as Victoria. She's got some office job after 3 years in project management. The wedding planning began immediately. Helen insisted on helping, though she was careful to let me make all the decisions. We found the perfect venue, the grand ballroom at the Hilton, the same place where David's parents had celebrated their 25th anniversary. It's expensive, I warned Helen, showing her the quote. It's perfect, she said firmly. Richard and I want to contribute. This is our son's wedding too. Meanwhile, my own family's enthusiasm remained muted. June seems rushed, my mother said when I told her we'd set a date. Are you sure you're not moving too fast? We've been together almost 5 months, Mom. When you know, you know. 5 months isn't very long. What's his family like? Are they traditional? The way she said traditional made it sound like a disease. They're wonderful. Supportive, kind, successful how? I hesitated. I still hadn't told my family about David's last name, about who his father was. Not because I was ashamed, but because I knew it would change everything. Suddenly, my engagement would matter to them, but for all the wrong reasons. David's an architect. His father owns a construction company. Technically true, but incomplete. Oh. My mother's interest visibly waned. Well, as long as he can support you. Support me. Like I wasn't perfectly capable of supporting myself. The engagement party was held at the Chin family home, a beautiful colonial with a backyard that looked like something from a magazine. Helen had insisted on hosting, and she'd gone all out, white lights strung through the trees, a catered dinner, flowers everywhere. My family arrived exactly on time, which for them was practically early. I watched through the living room window as they got out of their car, my parents and Marcus all wearing expressions like they were attending a dental appointment. They look thrilled to be here, David murmured in my ear. Give them time. They're just reserved. But as the evening progressed, reserved became awkward, became painful. My family clustered together in one corner, speaking to other guests only when directly addressed. My mother kept checking her watch, and my father spent most of the party on his phone. The worst moment came during the toasts. Richard stood up, champagne glass in hand, and began speaking about how happy he was to welcome me into the family. Victoria, he said, his voice carrying across the yard, has been a gift to our company and now a gift to our family. She's brilliant, hardworking, and makes our son happier than we've ever seen him. Applause filled the yard. I felt tears prick my eyes at the genuine warmth in his voice. Then David stood up. I want to thank my parents for raising me to recognize an extraordinary woman when I meet one. Victoria, you are my best friend, my partner, and my future. I can't wait to spend the rest of my life learning from you and laughing with you. More applause. Helen was crying happy tears. Even David's teenage cousin was filming the speech on her phone. But when I looked for my family in the crowd, they were gone. They'd left. During the toasts. Without saying goodbye. I found their note on the gift table. Had to leave early. Thanks for the party. Mom, Dad, and Marcus. That's it. That's all they could manage after driving an hour to celebrate their daughter's engagement. David found me in the kitchen, staring at the note. They left, I said simply. I know. Helen saw them go. They didn't even say goodbye. David pulled me into his arms, and I let myself cry against his shoulder. All the years of feeling like the family afterthought, the disappointment, the one who never quite measured up, it all came pouring out. "I'm sorry," I sobbed. "I'm sorry my family is so, hey." David tilted my chin up so I had to look at him. "You are not responsible for their behavior. You are perfect exactly as you are, and if they can't see that, it's their loss." "But what if they don't come to the wedding?" "What if, then we'll have a beautiful wedding surrounded by people who love and support us. Quality over quantity, remember?" Helen appeared in the doorway, her face creased with concern. "Victoria, sweetheart, are you okay?" "My family left early," I managed. "I know. I'm sorry. That must hurt." She didn't make excuses for them or try to minimize my feelings. She just acknowledged that it hurt, which somehow made it hurt less. "Helen," I said impulsively, "would you help me find a wedding dress?" I was going to ask my mother, but "I would be honored," she said, pulling me into another hug. "We'll find you the most beautiful dress in the world." 2 weeks later, Helen and I spent an entire Saturday at bridal boutiques. She cried when I came out in the perfect dress, a classic ball gown with delicate lace sleeves and a cathedral train. "You look like a princess," she whispered. My mother never even asked to see photos. As the wedding approached, my family's involvement remained minimal. They RSVP'd yes, requested 3 seats, and that was it. No offers to help with planning, no questions about the details, no excitement about the celebration. Meanwhile, the Chin family had embraced me completely. David's sister called me weekly from college to discuss wedding plans. His grandmother taught me to make her famous soup recipe. His cousins included me in their group chat about family gossip. I was gaining a family just as I was losing one. The week before the wedding, I finally told my parents about Richard Chin. Not because I wanted to, but because they'd find out anyway when they saw the wedding programs. "David's father is Richard Chin," I said during our final family dinner before the wedding. "He owns Chin Construction." My father's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "Richard Chin? The Richard Chin?" "Yes. Chin Construction builds half the commercial properties in this state," Marcus said, his voice suddenly interested. "They're worth millions." "Hundreds of millions," my father corrected, setting down his fork entirely. "And you're marrying his son?" my mother asked, like she was just putting this together. "Yes. I've been trying to tell you about David's family for months, but nobody seemed interested." The shift in their demeanor was immediate and obvious. Suddenly, my wedding mattered. Suddenly, they had opinions about everything. "We should have a larger rehearsal dinner," my mother said. "The Chens will expect something elegant." "The rehearsal dinner is already planned, Mom." "What about your dress? Is it appropriate for this level of society?" "My dress is perfect." "Maybe we should meet with Richard Chen before the wedding," my father suggested. "Build a relationship. Marcus has been looking for investors for his restaurant idea." And there it was. The real reason for their sudden interest. "Dad, this is my wedding, not a networking opportunity." "Of course, sweetheart. But it wouldn't hurt to make a good impression." I looked around the table at my family, my mother calculating social advantages, my father seeing business opportunities, my brother practically salivating over potential investments. None of them were thinking about my happiness. "I have to go," I said, standing up. "I have final dress fittings tomorrow." "Victoria," my mother called as I reached the door. "Make sure you mention to Helen that we'd love to host them for dinner after the honeymoon. It's important to maintain family relationships." Family relationships. Now they cared about family relationships. That night, I called David and told him everything. They're suddenly interested because of your father's money, I said, pacing around my apartment. I figured that would happen eventually. Dad warned me about it. What do you mean? He's dealt with this before. People who ignore him until they find out who he is, then suddenly want to be best friends. He calls them lottery ticket friends. That's exactly what my family is doing. Victoria, I need to tell you something. Dad's been keeping an eye on your family's situation. What do you mean? Your father's been applying for business loans. Marcus has been trying to get investors for that restaurant. Your parents took out a second mortgage on their house last year. I sat down hard on my couch. How do you know all this? Dad owns the bank that rejected your father's loan application. His company holds your parents' mortgage. This isn't a coincidence, Victoria. Your family needs financial help, and they just realized they're about to be related to someone who could provide it. The pieces clicked into place. The sudden interest in the wedding, the suggestions about dinner parties and relationship building, the questions about Helen and Richard's expectations. They saw dollar signs, not their daughter's happiness. What do we do? I asked. We have a beautiful wedding, and we see how they behave. Dad's dealt with worse people in business. He'll know how to handle them. The wedding morning arrived clear and beautiful. I woke up in the bridal suite at the Hilton, surrounded by Helen, David's sister Emma, and my 3 best friends from college. The room was filled with flowers, the smell of coffee, and the happy chaos of getting ready. Helen was braiding flowers into my hair when my phone rang. My mother. Victoria, we need to talk. Mom, I'm getting married in 4 hours. Can this wait? Your father and I have been discussing the situation with the Chens. We think it would be appropriate to make a speech at the reception. A speech about what? Welcoming them to the family, discussing future collaborations, that sort of thing. Future collaborations. At my wedding reception. Mom, no. Absolutely not. Victoria, be reasonable. This is a significant business opportunity. This is my wedding day. And you're being selfish. This affects the whole family. Helen looked up from my hair, her face concerned. I held up one finger, asking her to wait. Mom, I'm not discussing business at my wedding reception. End of conversation. If you don't think about anyone but yourself, I hung up on her. Everything okay? Helen asked gently. My mother wants to make a business pitch during the reception speeches. Helen's eyes widened. Oh, honey. I'm so sorry. It's okay. I can't deal with this today. Then don't. Today is about you and David. Everything else can wait. That's when I knew for certain that I was marrying into the right family. The ceremony was perfect. The church was filled with white roses and soft music. David waited for me at the altar in his black tuxedo, tears in his eyes as I walked down the aisle. But here's what made it truly special. Richard Chen walked me down the aisle. My father was there, sitting in the 3rd row with my mother and Marcus. But when the wedding planner asked who would be escorting me, I made a choice. Richard, I had said during rehearsal the night before. Would you walk me down the aisle? His eyes filled with tears. Victoria, I would be honored. But what about your father? My father has had 29 years to act like a father. You've shown me more love and support in 8 months than he has in my entire life. So Richard Chen, CEO of the largest construction company in the state, walked his son's bride down the aisle while her own father sat in the audience. The look on my parents' faces was indescribable. Shock, embarrassment, and dawning realization that they had underestimated both me and the situation. The ceremony itself was beautiful. David and I had written our own vows, promising to support each other's dreams, to build a life based on respect and partnership, to choose love every day. When the minister pronounced us husband and wife, the entire church erupted in applause. David kissed me like we were the only two people in the world, and for that moment, we were. The reception was held in the hotel's grand ballroom, decorated with thousands of white flowers and twinkling lights. Our first dance was to At Last by Etta James, and I felt like the lyrics were written for us. But the real fireworks started during the speeches. Richard stood up first, as father of the groom. His speech was perfect, funny, touching, welcoming me into the family with genuine warmth. Then my father stood up. I watched in horror as he walked to the microphone, his speech cards in hand. This was not part of the program. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I want to talk about the joining of two families today." David's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. "The Chin family has built something remarkable in this community," my father continued. "And the Hayes family has always believed in supporting local business." Oh no. He was really doing this. "I think there are tremendous opportunities for collaboration between our families. In fact, my son Marcus has a restaurant concept that would be perfect for Chin Construction's next retail development." The ballroom went silent. You could hear people shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Additionally, I've been exploring some investment opportunities that I'd love to discuss with Richard after the festivities. He was pitching business deals. At my wedding reception. Into a microphone. In front of 200 guests. Richard stood up smoothly, walking to the microphone with the confidence of a man who'd been handling awkward situations for decades. "Thank you, Robert," he said, gently taking the microphone. "I appreciate your enthusiasm about business opportunities. However, today is about celebrating Victoria and David." He turned to address the room. "I want everyone to know that Victoria earned her position at Chin Construction through her own merit. She's one of our most valuable employees because of her skills, her work ethic, and her integrity." The emphasis on earned and her own merit was subtle but unmistakable. "Victoria," Richard continued, looking directly at me, "you are the daughter I always hoped David would bring home. Not because of where you came from, but because of who you are." The ballroom erupted in applause. I was crying, David was crying, even some of the guests were wiping their eyes. But the best part was yet to come. As Richard handed the microphone back to the DJ, my mother stood up and marched over to him. I watched in slow-motion horror as she grabbed his arm. "We need to discuss Marcus's restaurant proposal," she said, loud enough for half the ballroom to hear. Richard looked at her with the polite smile he reserved for particularly difficult clients. "Mrs. Hayes, this is neither the time nor the place." "When, then?" "We've been trying to schedule a meeting for months." "Perhaps because I'm not interested in the opportunity." My mother's face went red. "You haven't even heard the proposal." "I don't need to. I've seen the business plan. Marcus sent it to my office 3 times. The conversations around us had stopped. People were openly staring now. "Then why haven't you responded?" my mother demanded. "Because the plan is fundamentally flawed, the financial projections are unrealistic, and frankly, the attitude displayed here tonight confirms my concerns about working with your family." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard turned to walk away, but my mother wasn't finished. "You can't judge our whole family based on one conversation," she called after him. Richard stopped and turned back. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority that had built an empire. "Mrs. Hayes, I've been watching your family for months. You ignored your daughter's engagement until you learned who I was. You skipped her engagement party. You've shown no interest in her happiness, only in what our relationship could do for you financially. The ballroom was completely silent now. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving. Furthermore, Richard continued, you attempted to use your daughter's wedding reception as a business networking event. This tells me everything I need to know about your character and your priorities. My mother opened her mouth to respond, but Richard held up a hand. I will not be investing in Marcus's restaurant. I will not be entering into any business relationships with the Hayes family. And if you continue to make my daughter-in-law uncomfortable with these inappropriate requests, we will have a more serious conversation about boundaries. Daughter-in-law. He called me his daughter-in-law, and he meant it. My mother stood there, mouth agape, as Richard walked back to the head table. The entire ballroom watched her return to her seat in humiliated silence. But Richard wasn't done. He stood up again, this time addressing the entire room. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to share something that Victoria is too modest to tell you herself. Last month, she single-handedly secured the largest contract in Chen Construction's 30-year history. The Morrison Medical Center project will create 200 jobs and bring $50 million in revenue to our company. Applause filled the ballroom. I felt my cheeks burning with embarrassment and pride. Victoria achieved this through her own talent and hard work. She didn't use family connections or ask for special treatment. She earned it. The contrast was clear to everyone in the room. The daughter who achieved success through merit versus the family who wanted to profit from that success without earning it. As the evening wound down, my family approached our table one last time. Victoria, my father said stiffly, we'll be leaving soon. Thank you for the lovely evening. You're welcome, Dad. Perhaps we could have lunch next week? There are some things we'd like to discuss. Before I could answer, David stood up. Mr. Hayes, with all due respect, Victoria will be on her honeymoon next week. And when we return, she'll be very busy with the Morrison project. Of course, my father said quickly. Maybe the week after? Maybe, I said non-committally. But we all knew the truth. The dynamic had shifted permanently. I was no longer the family disappointment hoping for their approval. I was a successful woman with a loving husband and supportive in-laws who valued me for who I was. My parents left without saying goodbye to the Chens. Marcus followed them, but not before slipping his business card to one of David's cousins just in case. As the last guests filtered out, Helen helped me out of my wedding dress and into a comfortable robe. We sat in the bridal suite, surrounded by flower petals and empty champagne glasses. I'm sorry about my family, I said. You have nothing to apologize for, Helen replied firmly. You can't control their behavior, only your response to it. I chose Richard to walk me down the aisle. I know. It was beautiful. I keep thinking I should feel guilty about it. Do you? I considered the question honestly. No. I feel free. And I did. For the first time in my life, I felt completely free from the need for my family's approval. David knocked on the door. Mrs. Chen? Are you ready to start our honeymoon? Mrs. Chen. I was Mrs. Chen now. We honeymooned in Italy for 2 weeks, visiting vineyards and art museums, eating incredible food and making plans for our future. David wanted to design and build our dream house. I wanted to expand Chen Construction's commercial division. We didn't talk about my family once. But when we returned, reality was waiting. My father had left 12 voicemails. Marcus had sent a 20-page revised business proposal via email. My mother had somehow gotten Helen's phone number and called her 5 times to discuss family dynamics. They're not giving up, I told David as we unpacked our suitcases. Dad figured they wouldn't. He's got a plan. What kind of plan? The kind that ends this permanently. The next morning, Richard called a meeting with my entire family. Not a social gathering, not a family dinner, a business meeting in his office conference room. They arrived dressed in their best clothes, carrying folders and looking nervous but hopeful. They thought they were finally getting their chance to pitch their ideas. Instead, they found Richard's lawyers waiting. "Thank you all for coming," Richard said, not bothering with pleasantries. "We need to discuss some boundaries." He opened a folder on the conference table. "Robert, you've applied for business loans from 3 different banks in the past 6 months. All 3 applications were denied due to insufficient collateral and poor credit history." My father's face went pale. "Marcus, your restaurant proposal has been rejected by 14 different investors. The concept is sound, but your financial management skills are concerning." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Carol, you've been telling people around town that you're practically family with Chen Construction, implying business relationships that don't exist." My mother started to protest, but Richard held up a hand. "Here's what's going to happen. You will stop using Victoria's marriage to me or to Chen Construction for any business purposes. You will stop approaching my family members, my employees, or my business associates with investment proposals or loan requests." He slid a document across the table. "This is a cease and desist order. If you continue to trade on the Chen family name or make Victoria uncomfortable with inappropriate requests, we will pursue legal action." "You can't do this," my mother said, her voice shaking. "We're family now." "No," Richard replied calmly. "Victoria is family. You are her relatives. There's a difference." The meeting lasted exactly 15 minutes. My family left with their folders full of rejected proposals and their first taste of what it meant to face Richard Chen in business mode. That afternoon, Richard called me into his office. "I want to promote you to Vice President of Development," he said without preamble. "Richard, I can't accept a promotion just because I'm your daughter-in-law." "You're not getting promoted because you're my daughter-in-law. You're getting promoted because you're the best project manager we've ever had, and I want to keep you from getting headhunted by our competitors." He slid another folder across his desk. 3 different companies have reached out to me about you in the past month. The salary offers are substantial." I opened the folder and nearly choked. The numbers were incredible. "I don't want to lose you," Richard continued. "So I'm offering you a VP position, a 40% raise, equity in the company, and your own development team. This is too much. Victoria, you secured a $50 million contract. The commission alone justifies this promotion." That evening, David and I celebrated with dinner at our favorite restaurant. As we toasted my promotion, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Heard about your promotion. We should celebrate as a family. Maybe over dinner at our house this weekend? We could discuss some opportunities." I showed the text to David. He shook his head, laughing. "They really don't give up, do they? Should I respond?" "Up to you. But remember, you don't owe them anything." I deleted the text without responding. Over the next few months, my family made several more attempts to reconnect. Birthday cards with business proposals tucked inside. Invitations to dinner with special guests who happened to be potential investors. Christmas gifts accompanied by hints about Marcus's new and improved restaurant concept. I ignored them all. Meanwhile, my life with David and the Chen family flourished. We bought a beautiful house in the hills overlooking the city. I built my development team into the most successful division at Chen Construction. David's architectural firm landed its first major contract, designing a shopping center that my team would build. We were partners in every sense of the word. The final confrontation came at my first wedding anniversary. David and I had planned a small celebration, dinner with his parents, cake with a few close friends. Nothing elaborate, just marking the milestone with the people who mattered. But as we were cutting the cake, my entire family showed up unannounced. "Surprise," my mother announced, barging into the Chen family home with a wrapped gift and a forced smile. "We couldn't miss your anniversary." Helen looked mortified. "Victoria, I'm so sorry. I had no idea they were coming." "We wanted to surprise her," my father explained, as if this was a normal thing to do. "And we brought a special gift," Marcus added, hefting a large wrapped box. David stepped forward. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is a private family celebration." "We are family," my mother insisted. "No," I said quietly. "You're not." The room went silent. "You ignored me for 29 years until you realized David's family had money. You turned my engagement party into a networking event. You tried to use my wedding reception for business pitches. You've spent the past year harassing my in-laws with investment schemes." "Victoria, that's not fair," my father protested. "What's not fair is showing up uninvited to my anniversary dinner because you have another business proposal to pitch." Marcus held up the wrapped box. "It's not a business proposal. It's a gift." "What kind of gift?" "A scale model of the restaurant. We thought Richard might want to see the design concept." "A scale model." They brought a scale model of Marcus's restaurant to my anniversary dinner. Richard stepped forward, his voice dangerously calm. "I want you to leave. Now." "We just got here," my mother said. "And now you're leaving. This is my home, and you're not welcome. You can't keep us from our daughter." "I'm not keeping you from anything," Richard replied. "Victoria is a grown woman who can make her own choices. And she's chosen not to have a relationship with people who only value her for what she can provide." The truth of it hit like a physical blow. They weren't here to celebrate my anniversary. They were here to make another business pitch, using my special day as leverage. "Get out," I said, my voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "Get out of my in-laws' house, get out of my life, and stop pretending you care about anything other than what you can get from me." "Victoria," my father tried one more time. "No. I'm done. I've spent my entire life trying to earn your approval, your attention, your love. But you only noticed me when I became useful to you." I looked at each of them, my parents, my brother, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I have a family now. People who value me for who I am, not what I can do for them. People who celebrate my successes instead of trying to profit from them. People who show up because they want to be there, not because they want something. Helen stepped up beside me, her arm around my shoulders. David took my hand. Richard moved to stand protectively in front of all of us. "This is my family," I said firmly. "You're just people I used to know." They left without another word, taking their restaurant model with them. As the door closed behind them, I felt something I'd never experienced before: complete peace. But the story doesn't end there. Because 6 months later, karma delivered the final blow in the most unexpected way. Marcus's restaurant concept? The one he'd been desperately trying to get funded? He finally found an investor. A man named Thompson who promised to back the entire project for a 70% ownership stake. Thompson turned out to be a con artist who disappeared with Marcus's life savings and left him with $200,000 in debt for construction that was never completed. The kicker? Richard Chen had tried to warn them. He'd run a background check on Thompson and discovered the fraud, but when he called to warn my father, Dad hung up on him, assuming it was another rejection. My parents lost their house trying to bail Marcus out of his debts. They had to move into a small apartment across town, and my father was forced to close his struggling consulting business. Meanwhile, David and I bought our dream home, a beautiful colonial that Richard designed and my team built. We hosted our first Christmas there, surrounded by the Chen family and the friends who'd become our chosen family. My mother drove by the house once. The neighbors told us they saw her sitting in her car outside our gate, just staring at the life she'd never be part of. Sometimes the best revenge isn't plotting someone's downfall, it's building a life so beautiful, so fulfilling, so surrounded by genuine love that their absence becomes a gift rather than a loss. If you've ever had to choose between toxic family and your own happiness, drop a comment telling me how it turned out. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in choosing the people who choose you, and ring the notification bell because we're just getting started with stories about building the life you deserve. Thanks for listening, and remember, blood doesn't make you family. Love does.